I am super stoked to be here today to talk to you about Bitcoin. I'm going to be breaking down a lot of different subjects today. We're going to be talking about the golden cross that we've seen or are seeing right now on the daily time frame of Bitcoin. I'm going to give you guys a predicted top range. Now, most of you already know my expected top, and I gave to everybody a couple months ago, I would say in the dark hours of March and April, I gave everybody the prediction that we would indeed get back to 100K and very likely that we would jump up to 114 to 116. Now, the big question is that going to be the top? How much higher can we expect? A lot of people said when it was dark and dreary and scary and we were down at the lows and nobody knew whether or not Bitcoin was ever going to climb again, a lot of people said, if we could just get back up to 100K, I'll sell everything, I'll cash out, I need that money back. Now we're there. And one of the big points of today is to give you another prediction as to where the top could possibly be. I'm going to be giving you my pivot 1 and my pivot 2. Now, on all of the Magnificent 7, I gave you guys recently pivot 1s, and those were on the money within a single dollar. They hit those levels and they pulled back. We're in some chop right now, but largely I believe that the market's still bullish. I've been saying consistently that we would remain bullish in a choppy market moving higher through the month of May and possibly the first week of June. And in this same time frame, we're seeing Bitcoin reach brand new all-time highs. Where could that potentially come to an end? Where could the top be formed? I'm going to give you a strong opinion today. I'm going to give you my pivot 1 and my pivot 2. We're going to break down what a breakdown would look like in the charts. How do we know at what point, if the price crosses below from this point forward, should we assume that it's going to create panic selling and a cascade of red candles until we enter into the winter? I've got that for you today. Now, with all of these things, there's so many topics. We could talk about the ecosystem that from Sui that got hacked and did that set up for a buying opportunity, or are there's going to be more down days there? There's a lot of topics that I would love to cover with you, but I have brought on my guys, right? We've got Mark from Tribal Trades and Tim from Investing Bros, and we're going to bounce off some of my strong predictions, I guess, against their research and what do they think. And this is a no friend zone, which means they are, I love these guys, both of them, but I want to open up the stage for them to absolutely disagree. I want a hostile conversation. I want him to scream at me through the mic and say, Josh, you're dead wrong, brother. This is going to be a great show. I promise you, I've come with fire in my heart and technicals on my mind. Welcome to the show, Tim. Welcome to the show, Mark. I appreciate you guys both being here. Why don't we just kick things off and say hi to Mark. Mark, how are you doing today? And what are your thoughts about where we're at sitting right now? We're back at the top, baby. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me in here. And always good to see my friend Tim here. Yeah, look, I think it's great. I remember when we did a show, Josh, and you talked about 73K being the bottom. Geez, you missed it by $500, I think. Wow. Can you be a little bit more accurate next time? Because you're off your game a little bit there. Just kidding. I jest. But yeah, I think that, when we saw on the charts that the 50-week simple moving average got tagged,
Beautiful.
that was the buy signal right there. And I alerted the Discords, the Stocks with Josh and the Tribal Trades Discord. I was buying and bought that dip beautifully. And of course, now we've seen Bitcoin have some great momentum. The momentum indicators on the weekly, just the MACD was a little bit more lagging there, but that also has flipped bullish just in the last couple of weeks, which has just given further fuel to the fire. And of course, as you started the show with, the golden cross, we all saw it coming, right? You saw it coming, and then you knew what was going to happen because everybody was going to share about it. And of course, retail has aped in there and all the bags have pumped. So I think it's looking pretty good. I would expect some more upside. Of course, the daily momentum indicators have just recently flipped bullish as well. So I would expect us to see some continued upside. Bitcoin was in a bull flag on the daily time frame, and I did share on my show the technical target for that was around about $113,000, which there's a Fibonacci level there as well. So I do expect it to get up to that level and find some resistance, but overall the market's looking very good.
Guys, no, this is not Stock Mo. This is perhaps at best Kiwi Mo. It's Mark from his own YouTube show called Tribal Trades. And in the description of the video is a link to both of their YouTube pages. I want to encourage you to go and subscribe. Now, Mark was talking about the Discords, the Stocks with Josh Discord. And when you go to his page, he has a smaller private Discord for some members. But in the Stocks with Josh Discord, I want you guys to know that Mark is providing daily leadership on crypto. And in particular, he gave the community a fabulously timed call on coin stock. And just briefly cover that so people can understand the opportunities there.
Yeah, so obviously Coinbase got the listing for the S&P 500, and so we just snagged an entry there just based off some of the momentum indicators that I saw. We shared that in the community, and people were able to jump in on that before. It already took a little bit of a leg up on the futures trading on Sunday, so Monday it already pumped a bit, and it gave us a second bite and a second entry to get in on that stock, and that has since done really, really well, pumped up there. And I actually opened another coin long position today, which is actually looking pretty good as well. So I expect the crypto related stocks are doing really well. MicroStrategy's done great. Obviously Tesla is crypto related because they have a position in Bitcoin, even though they haven't added to it. And of course, the new kid on the block, CEP, which is doing a SPAC merger with will become the ticker XXI. And I gave that one at 20, I think it was $27, and that jumped up to about $49. So that trade has worked out really well. Even before the merger has happened, that stock is absolutely pumping. And that's got USDT Tether behind it. It's got is it SoFi Bank, Tim, or SoftBank? I always forget. And it's also, SoFi, I believe, got Bitfinex Exchange backing it as well. And that's going to be a rival to MicroStrategy. And it'll be very, very interesting once the XXI, which stands for the Roman numerals for 21, because there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and they're going to launch with at least 42,000 Bitcoin in their treasury. So that's definitely a stock to watch, CEP, which will soon become the XXI ticker as a rival.
Guys, if you're looking for details on plays like this is where they come out the quickest, is going to be in the Stocks with Josh Discord. There's a link in the description of the video, as well as the top pinned comment, if you guys want to come and join that and get these types of hot plays from my man Mark. Now let's talk to Tim. Tim from Tribal Trades. Tim, here we are back at the top. And I know that you have to be considering where we're at. And, everybody's been given that second chance. And, we are always battling between two emotions, greed and fear. We just went through the boot camp of fear, and now we're feeling that greed again. I want you to know that I'm feeling the greed again. Why am I feeling the greed? Because I have gotten back to day trading crypto. I stepped away from it when the liquidity was drying up, but now that liquidity has come back to town, I've been popping trades. Mark and I were on the phone the other day. He called me, and right when he called me, I entered a trade. And by the time the conversation was over, Mark, I had made $2,000. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah, you were multitasking. You were holding conversation with me and printing money there. So.
Yeah, I of course I was teasing Mark a little bit. I was like, I don't know how you're doing, but while we've been sitting here, I made the bag. I made the bag. But yes, why am I feeling those feelings of greed? Is because money's flowing back into my life, and it's coming through crypto. And in particular, I'm so tempted to talk about SUI right now, but I've got to put it on a shelf. This show is about Bitcoin. Where's the top? Where's the pivot 1? Where's the pivot 2? And most importantly, when? And that's going to be my opinions. Then we're going to get their opinions and see if there's any confluence to this. But Tim, what are your thoughts on where we're at? And how are you feeling? You feeling greedy, sir? Are you feeling cautious? I'd love to know how you're sitting right now.
Well, I'll say this: I'm not surprised that we're back and we hit new all time highs. Later in 2025, I'm a little surprised at how fast we've come back. I actually we did buy the 74.5 dip. That's where we have an indicator we like to use called a smart trail on the 2-weekly chart, and that was the highest sell signal we ever saw. I always like to buy the very tops. Josh, rarely do I buy bottoms on macro scales borderline perfectly. We bought it 74.5 because that's where the smart trail started for the 2-weekly. I thought there's a chance 72, 73 was going to happen. But I bought early. I bought the top of it saying, you know what, we're going to do this. That trade has been amazing. I'm holding that one for quite some time. I'm considering, the other day I told audience members I was originally going to hold it to an all-time high. I was going to hold it back to 109.5. The fact that we got back here this quickly, my expectation was actually we weren't going to get back here before maybe late June, maybe July. So we did it so quickly. And now that I'm watching the M2 global money supply, I'm sitting here saying, I think I'm going to hold on to this trade. I'm going to hold on to this long continually. And one of the reasons why, the other surprise that I'm going through right now on my charts is my long-term charts doing great. I got some long-term long positions open on low 2x, 3x positions that are doing phenomenal. There's been no major pullback on Bitcoin over the last month and some change. I keep waiting for a nice little 5%, 10% pullback on Bitcoin, just a little healthy correction in a higher high and higher low situation. And yeah, we have some pauses. I would call them little itty bitty pauses, but Bitcoin just keeps going up and up and up. And even though I'm a technical analyst, and I know the three of us were here were technical analysts, there's a level of when you watch the speed and the lack of corrections that Bitcoin's had since back in early April when this rally got going. Are we watching the full appreciation of what Bitcoin was meant to be and is going to be happen? I mean, we just saw the Japanese yen 30-year bonds skyrocketing, right? So they're going crazy. People in Japan are very worried about their currency, their storage of value. Are Japanese people flooding into the United States? We're watching this drama play out between the United States and China with tariff information. It looks like we have some decent news, but if you thought you were panicking here in the United States, I don't know how many people are watching this show in the United States or other countries. If you think you're panicking about what the future looks like, imagine you're a Chinese civilian that works for a company whose massive need is to export everything over to the United States. And all of a sudden, this trade war between the leaders of the countries, it makes you wonder if you're going to have a job either. People are worried about their currency. People are worried about fiat. And I think we're watching the world say, you know what? The trajectory of fiat currency is down. The trajectory of this thing called Bitcoin is up. It's time to go ahead and start stacking those sats. People are wondering who's going to buy at new all-time highs above 110, 120, 130. We're watching those people. They're coming out of the woodwork. They're buying these high levels of Bitcoin. I don't think we're anywhere close to being done.
Well, okay, we found our first place where Tim and I are going to spar a little bit. And it's not because I disagree with the premise that he gave me. I believe that there is a ton of currency instability throughout the world. I personally believe that the only stable currency in the world is the United States dollar. I am pro-dollar, and with all of its problems and the drop in credit worthiness, the fact is that with America's checks and balances and the huge infrastructure of system that we have the safer place to park money than anywhere else. I'd prefer to park my money in the bank in the United States over any other country. Maybe perhaps Switzerland, or a couple countries where there would be a semi-equal level of safety. But at the end of the day, if I had to choose a specific spot, it'd be right here in the USA. Now, I want to comment on the fact that I believe that even though what I think that Tim said is largely true, I don't know that it will translate into the desired effect that a lot of folks in the crypto space want out of it. I think that largely we've seen that right now, Bitcoin and altcoins are largely running with the macro. Sometimes they run before, sometimes they run after, but for the most part, they're just considered a risky asset. And right now, because of the Feds, I think secretly buying bonds and producing a quantitative easing effect, pushing money back into the system, it's giving life to Bitcoin. But if the environment changed and we went back to a tightening environment where growth stocks were less of a priority or less of a focus, I think that we would see this get sold faster and harder. Obviously, the alts more, but Bitcoin would get hit just the same like Tesla and Nvidia and Apple. Largely, I would say that my psychological view is just to tag Bitcoin into the Magnificent Seven. It's sort of like the Netflix number 8, Bitcoin number 9. They're all basically going to be affected by the macro. The underlining narrative that I think is repeated very strongly, and I'll give you a rebuttal chance here for this, and then I'm going to get to a clue as to where we're at. I'm going to give you guys my first major prediction, but I will give you a chance to rebuttal here. But the bottom line is that this idea of scarcity can be manipulated, and the idea of the necessity of Bitcoin as being a safe haven, we didn't see it. And I'm not even going to pull up the chart, but in my mind, I win the debate the minute I show you the gold chart, because that's where all the money went when the market was afraid. It didn't go into Bitcoin. Money came flowing out of Bitcoin and into gold. So as far as 2024, and I'm driving it in, as far as 2024 and 2025, nobody gave a crap about Bitcoin or currency instability. At the end of the day, the traditional risk off went back to gold. Let me give you a chance to fight that.
Well, I think something I'm going to start off by saying, I don't think that the emergence of Bitcoin is going to be the death of gold whatsoever. But at the same time, what I will say is altcoins are trickling behind, but Bitcoin's sprinting, right? Like altcoins are going for a jog. And even the stock market's doing well, but Bitcoin is sprinting. You know, I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Paul Barron. Some of you guys know who he is, but he was talking about some insiders he has over in New York. They're talking about the institutions, Wall Street. They're going big right now on the ETFs for Bitcoin. They're going really big in there right now, and that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin is at new all-time highs now. Is the institutions are starting to play the game well. Of course, you hear the rhetoric daily from different politicians in Washington, D.C. I mean, there's a whole movement that wants to replace the gold storage in the United States government with Bitcoin. Now, I think that's getting ahead of ourselves. It's going to take a lot of legislation to get that done. I'm not predicting that to happen in 2025. But even the conversation of some of our superior politicians making that kind of statement, that's pretty massive. You're also watching other countries. Let's talk about India, for example. Not a small country, a lot of people and a lot of money over there in India. For years, they said it's illegal to trade Bitcoin. It's illegal to trade crypto. We don't want anything to do with it. Well, what have they done in this last couple of weeks? They've actually come out, their political front is coming out and saying, you know what? We shouldn't be banning crypto. We simply should be regulating it. And I hear you on gold, and I think at the moment I'm not ready to make an official statement that Bitcoin has split away from the risk-on assets. I'm not saying that it's time for it to be fully treated that way, but I think that I think even institutions in Wall Street are waking up and saying it's time to go in on Bitcoin. And another thing that I'm going to kind of say here, for example, for the sake of bullish just on crypto as a whole, but mostly to Bitcoin. What's happening right now in Washington with the vote for the stablecoin bill, the Genius Act? We're probably hours away, maybe a day away from getting a final answer there, where we'll have clear regulation on stablecoins. There are billions, if not trillions of dollars right now waiting to be deployed into Bitcoin, into stablecoins, into tokenized real-world asset plays, things like Chainlink and Ondo and AVAX and XRP and others, but they're waiting on regulation. They're not going to go heavily investing into this asset class when there's no clear rules on what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. But as regulation becomes more clear, we're starting with stablecoins. Besant's already told us by the end of the summer, we're supposed to have more clarity on the crypto space as a whole. Watch a lot of locked up assets that have not been allowed to be deployed into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies be deployed later on. The level of where we're disagreeing, I'm a little lost on where our disagreements are, because I agree with you. Gold's still going to go up. I still think there's gold bugs out there. They're going to flourish over there. But I mean, even go back to September. I mean, Bitcoin, even with the volatile pullback that it had, people are not surprised. They're looking at, if I bought gold in September and I bought Bitcoin in September, it's not even close which one accrued more wealth for me over the last, what would that be now, 7-8 months. People know that Bitcoin is here. It's here to stay, and institutions are starting to play the game.
All right, I love it. That's a very fair comeback. Let me start with one of my first topics, which is what type of clues will the market give us that we are nearing the top? And this is not a bearish case. It's important for us to entertain both sides of the scenario, and I promise you I'm going to entertain the hyper bullish scenario on Bitcoin, and then I'm going to let these guys loose and they can say whatever they want. Bitcoin to the moon. I'm going to the Bitcoin conference here next week, and I can't wait to hear Michael Saylor. I'm going to sit there thinking about the Bitcoin I own. And last time he told me that it was going to be worth $48 million a coin at some point in my lifetime. And I'm just going to sit there with a smile on my face while he gives me an update, right? So we're going to also talk about the timing of the top. I made a point that we might be getting close to my pivot one leading up to the Bitcoin conference, but I'll save that for the next conversation. But right now, I want to talk about what type of clues might the market be giving us that we're at least getting near the potential of pivot one with a little bit of pullback, okay? And what is that going to be? Well, it's found in the question by Gene Wesley. Why MicroStrategy stock not pumping now, my friend? Let me just quickly show you the chart. I'm going to make my point, and then I'm going to get to Mark here. But right now, I got my face up. Let me come back to the chart.
I'd say a lawsuit, the MicroStrategy lawsuit isn't helping the price.
Why don't you comment on that while I before I go to the chart?
Yeah, well, MicroStrategy is facing that class action lawsuit. I guess people maybe not as excited as you and I about how much Bitcoin Michael Saylor has been buying and how much stock is being diluted to buy that. And I think that's a fair point and a fair comment. Whether or not the lawsuit is just or unjust is not for me to comment on, but the fact that it exists and it's high profile and in the news is going to cause some investors to be hesitant on the stock. And I think that's a fair point, especially with CEP coming into the market. XXI, are they going to do a better job? Are they going to dilute this stock, or are they going to use the profits?
Well,
Tether makes billions of profits every quarter. Are they going to use those profits to acquire more Bitcoin? What is it SoFi Bank or SoftBank and Bitfinex? So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. But at the moment, MicroStrategy, the giant, has a little bit of a David coming at him in CEP, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, especially with the lawsuit.
Let's explain to the audience a little bit of what's going on with MicroStrategies. Michael Saylor has imagined this scenario where they leverage the stock by offering more stock for sale and take that money and drive it into Bitcoin, sort of like a circular system that keeps feeding itself. Yep. The company, the value of the stocks goes up because they hold more Bitcoin. Thus, they can have a higher valuation in raising money, buy Bitcoin, and sort of a rinse and repeat until this thing just goes to the moon. The most valuable stock in the world is what he's imagined. But the problem is that that's an extremely bullish scenario. We know that he is a top bull. This guy is outbulled all the bulls, and he's in the number one spot. Yeah. But the question is, to those who are currently holding the MicroStrategies stock or MicroStrategy, the question is this too ambitious? Should they do it slowly? And now they've got competition. But let me just run you into the stock real quick here. Let's go look at the chart. So I just want to point out a couple things here. One, you can see that we have this beautiful markup phase off of the double bottom or even triple bottom that we had recently. And now we're in clearly a consolidation. And this does look very bullish to me overall. If you take a step back and we're on the daily chart, we are seeing some momentum reset here. The RSI is beginning to fade. And if we break, we're currently beneath 60. And you want to hold 60 because if you lose 60, then you can expect more of a downturn. Currently, we've lost 60. You want to see it come back to 60 and bounce. If it doesn't bounce there, then it means it's going to pull back a little bit more and hit the 50, and then you're going to hope that it bounces at that point. but we do see some bearish divergence on this chart. That's just a quick overview of the chart, but let me just give you guys my thoughts on it and remind you from sort of a big picture view of the way the Wall Street investors are looking at this. In my mind, this is the view of the Main Street on Wall Street. MicroStrategies is a leveraged position on Bitcoin, which means that it's higher risk. I mean, you guys can understand that. So Bitcoin has its own level of risk, but then if you multiply it with leverage, it now is higher risk. And so what often happens as these are pushing higher, the one that's perceived as the higher risk scenario is where people are going to lock in profits early. This is why MicroStrategies soared the last time Bitcoin was moving up towards its new all-time high, but then it began to drop heavily before Bitcoin actually hit its all-time high. And then when Bitcoin pulled off of its new all-time high, then it dropped like a rock. And so I'm going to throw this idea out there, and it was part of my underlining predictions I wanted to give you guys today, is if you want an early signal for when Bitcoin is topping, look at MicroStrategies, because the Main Street on Wall Street will pre-unload their MicroStrategy position as they're imagining that Bitcoin is getting ready to top. I'm going to shift real quick since I've got you up, Mark. Why don't you comment on that? And then I'd love to get your response, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think you can look and see that there is a connection, a strong connection, because MicroStrategy changed to strategy and went all orange and are really going in on the Bitcoin narrative there. And so I think investors are just being cautious there. And I think we should look to the MicroStrategy price. And I think that can tell us a bit of a story. At times I've found that one has front run the other. And so, but I would say, I think like myself, an investor like you all, it does concern me that the stock continues to be diluted to buy more Bitcoin. And one wonders what would happen, if the price of Bitcoin was to drop too low, what kind of position that would put MicroStrategy in. So I just think investors are cautious there. Like I said, you got CEP coming in, new kid on the block. It could be like buying MicroStrategy at $30, $40. I think there's an opportunity there that Jack Mallers and Paolo Aduana from Tether are seizing there, and that will be very interesting to see how that battle plays out.
Well, let's get Tim's thoughts on this. Tim, I'm curious your thought on MicroStrategy as a front-running sell-off stock in preparation of Bitcoin topping. And what your general thought on the bullishness of MicroStrategy is moving forward.
Well, I'll start off by saying, Josh, absolutely. Like it's something we've talked about for a while historically. And I say historically, I mean the last couple of years, the last year and some change. MicroStrategy is almost the leading indicator of what Bitcoin's going to do. Now there's a new kid on the block, or I said yesterday, a new kid on the playground, the CEP. That is going to come. There's a couple of factors kind of coming in and making MicroStrategy potentially be an interesting one to watch. That's a little different because, like Mo said, you got the lawsuit. There's going to be some people who are just on edge about, oh, there's a lawsuit. How's this going to affect the stock? Is there another way I can get access to this Bitcoin other than just Bitcoin? Because it's almost like MicroStrategy is like buying leveraged Bitcoin position. It's more volatile. It can move up faster. Well, now all of a sudden, I have new kid on the block. It's new. It's shiny. I don't have to worry about this lawsuit coming. So there's the competition there. But I'll go back to even the conversation we were having before. If you are in Japan right now, super worried about the devaluing of your currency, are you going to buy a stock or are you going to change it into a different currency? I think that right now, Bitcoin in and of itself to a person in Japan or another country where they're super worried about their fiat, holding Bitcoin itself is actually more valuable than going and buying MicroStrategy. That's a bigger incentive right there. So I think there's a story to tell there as well. Why is MicroStrategy not at new all-time highs, but Bitcoin is? Because we're actually watching people buy Bitcoin straight up for being Bitcoin, not just wanting to make money on it, which again, historically, the better play would be just go buy MicroStrategy. Michael Saylor will buy it for you, and then he'll get to hold all the Bitcoin. That's kind of my take about MicroStrategy at the moment. What is interesting about the chart with MicroStrategy, and I don't need to pull it up, you mentioned that there's a little bit of bearish divergence. Well, at the same time, there's also building bullish divergence, and that's what makes these things really interesting. Whenever you see, I guess you can share my screen because it'll make more sense if I explain it and show it this way. Whenever, as Josh said, you get this nice explosive rally, and then you enter a season of consolidation. But as he mentioned, let me minimize my other oscillators. We'll just focus on the RSI. Like he said, you do have a little bit of, well, you actually could make a better argument. There's more bullish divergence. We're still trending upward, right? I'll change that to blue just for bullish. We're trending upward with lows of the price action since this low back here on May 6th. But you take a look at the oscillator right there. That's a lower low. So this would be a hidden bullish divergence or a continuation divergence where we did start with bearish divergence right here. There's a very clear starting right there. Let's change this to red for bearish. You started with some bearish divergence where you put in a lower high. Well, let's go back over here. I actually mixed the spots up. You came in with a slightly higher high. There we go. Higher high in the price action, but a lower high in the oscillator. But now we just put in, Josh, a lower high. So now the bearish divergence is gone, but the bullish divergence is standing. To me, I think this paints a picture that MicroStrategy is about to make another move to the upside here as well. And for that, I mean, you're probably going to start keeping your eyes on. There is a little pocket here on 442, but I think with Bitcoin hitting new all-time highs, and I'm sure we're going to get into the Bitcoin chart. We're going to talk about, like you said earlier, the pivots that we're looking at. But if Bitcoin keeps on pushing, makes its move up to, Mark said 113 earlier, 113K. I'm going to talk about 115K to 120K later. I'm interested to hear what Josh says. But if Bitcoin keeps pushing, don't be surprised if some people do come back and say, all right, comparatively to Bitcoin, MicroStrategy is oversold. It's actually now a great opportunity to buy MicroStrategy. Let me maybe even take some profit on my CEP over here. And then all of a sudden, MicroStrategy shooting to new all-time highs. And again, we're working on this hidden bullish divergence that could be the catalyst to send us all the way up there.
First of all, I love Tim's technicals. To be very clear, I think that the MicroStrategy chart looks extremely healthy. I don't see anything wrong with it. I see momentum coming down. I see price action running largely sideways, which looks to me like the potential for a momentum reset. The main point that I see it hitting, if you guys notice on my chart, let me pull that back up real quick. I want to be clear with people because I think there's 2 points I'm making. You guys see that I've got marked on here a 443. That's not the take profit range. If we get above 443, you can see that this was a triple top rejection in the past. Then that's going to be a very explosive move higher. So I absolutely think momentum is resetting on MicroStrategies. And to me, this is a hold and or buy. The main point that I want you guys to take away from what I said is that it's going to be a clue that the Bitcoin move is nearing an end when it front runs and sells off. And there's no sell-off structure or signal on MicroStrategy right now. But I wanted you guys to remember that. If all of a sudden you're like, darn, my MicroStrategy is in the hole, this thing has collapsed, it's absolutely red, but you see the Bitcoin price holding up or even climbing, remember that I told you that it's going to be one of your first clues that the Bitcoin top is getting very, very near. Right now, MicroStrategies is a hold and or buy. I wanted you guys to be clear about that. I don't agree with Tim that there is hidden bullish divergence. At most, I will give him that the momentum is resetting, but he's got a very sharp eye, and maybe I'm wrong. The momentum looks great on MicroStrategies. Okay, let's get to the next point. I keep flipping who's going to be up front. There we go. There we go. I laid that out just today. All right, we're going to talk. I saw a comment in there and someone said, laughing my ass off, Josh, you said that Bitcoin top was 110K. And I want to highlight that, not to give attention to silly comments, but just to say that both of these guys know where I have given my predictive top. Matter of fact, I'll pause and ask them, where have I suggested that the top would potentially be?
Oh, the last time I recall was was it around 116?
Yes.
116?
So I have suggested that we would get to 114 to 116 before this whole crypto cycle was over. And what I want you to take away from that is that when we were at 74 and 84 and 94, I was consistently telling you that we would get to where we're at right now. And I said this is my pivot one. You always are going to have more predictions based on when you get to your pivot one, what happens? Does a sell-off occur or does buying accelerate? So this is a realistic target for everybody that we will get between 114 and 116. But here's what you have to watch for. The day and the hour we get there, if we do not see a surge in volume, we are essentially up against a fib extension resistance. So we need to see new buyers flooding in at 114,000 because FOMO is occurring and everybody believes it's going up to 120 or 130. But my pivot one target that you guys can mark on your chart, this is nothing new. I've said it repeatedly. I'm going to give these guys an opportunity to give their conservative target. This is my conservative target. And then I'm going to give my more ambitious target. My pivot one target is 114 to 116. And I'm going to give you guys today the line in the sand where if we run up there and we get down below a certain price, it's the floor has fallen out. It's the point of no return. But before I do that, Tim, would you give me, if I can get you pulled up correctly, what would you say your pivot, what do you think your immediate target is? Where are we going to go and have to cool off after we get there?
You know, people are going to laugh because I've even seen comments in chat. Some people have said Tim's the moon boy. Tim's the bull. You know, Tim is probably the most bullish person here. I think, if I'm not wrong, Mark, tell me if I'm wrong. I think you believe, last time I was on with you, 175K could be a potential top based on the golden pocket extension. If you go back out to like the entire bear market of 2022, I'm the highest. I think we're going above 200,000 before it's all said and done. With that said, Josh, you're a technical analysis goat for a reason. I think there's a lot about that 114 to 116 range that we should have some form of a pullback around there. I think there's a chance we make a little sprint to 120 just because of the psychological level. There's more of a psychological level of going to 120 than 116. But at the same time, I have been waiting, as I said earlier in this video, the biggest surprise to me is not that Bitcoin is rallying, is that Bitcoin has not had a pullback to, say, the daily smart trail, which is very normal even within bull markets yet. And what I'm watching happen right now, I think the next spot is 116, and then you make a pullback back down to the daily smart trail, which is a moving target. There's no way to know exactly where it's going to be. My guess, somewhere north of $100,000. I think we literally could get to 115, 116, pull back down to $100,000, find some support there, and then continue another leg up to, say, 150, 175, 200. I don't know what the next target's going to be. Short story. You guys know who Arthur Hayes is. Anyone in chat who knows who Arthur Hayes is? He made an interesting prediction. I don't agree with him 100%, but he makes me feel less bullish when he says his thing. He believes we're going to skyrocket this summer to 150,000, then pull all the way back to 100,000. And before the end of the year, so we're talking about before December, $250,000 for Bitcoin. Now, I think $250,000 is doable in this bull market, but before the end of the year, after going to 150 and pulling back down to 100, that's asking for a lot of volatility that I don't know if we have those kind of moves ahead of us. But in a nutshell, pivot, I think we have a different definition of what a pivot means, Josh. So I'm interested to hear maybe you elaborate a little more. But I think you and I are in agreement. There will be taking profits, selling off that happens at 116. I guess maybe where you and I would probably differ is how low do we pull back after that? And then when does the next big run, new all-time high, come sooner? I still think we have new all-time highs later this year. Maybe not 250 though.
All right, we'll do a round of where exactly I think we'll pull back to after we hit this 114 and 116. And the way that the market's running, I really do imagine that we're going to get to this 114, 116. Honestly, by Michael Saylor's speech here this upcoming week, I think he's going to take the stage and everyone's going to be feeling that raging bull that he gives us, those good bull vibes. And we're probably going to see Bitcoin that day hit this 114 to 116 range. And then there's going to be profit taking. There's already been big profit taking. There was a huge mega whale dumped his wallet at 104,000. Whales are coming into the dock to unload what they've been acquiring, looking ahead 3 to 6 months down the road to where Bitcoin price will be. And it's just managing your trade. It's managing your investments safely. You haven't made any money till you sell, my friend. All right, let's get Tim in here. Tim, I'd be curious to hear from you. What is your immediate target? And if you've got any why on it, that would be wonderful.
It's Mark. I've been called Mo. I've been called Tim.
I will not get the names straight
right now. I know that Tim from Tribal Trades, so he's joined Tribal Trades now. So now I got to join Investing Brothers there.
There we go. There we go.
There'll be a quiz at the end of the show.
Exactly. Yeah, look, I think that Bitcoin's just getting started with the Golden Cross. Historically, we've seen really good upside. When we look from the last time that the Golden Cross happened, I believe it was just around October 2024, and then Bitcoin went up from about 67,000 all the way up to $108,000. So I would still expect that there's some more room to run. That doesn't mean that there won't be some pullbacks, some breathers, and some pauses there along the way. And then as far as where a possible top, I don't know if you can share my screen there, Josh, and bring that up. What I'm looking for here.
Yeah, there you go.
If you brought that up, or is that
yes,
Tim's
sir.
screen? It's my screen here. So as you can see here, I mean, we've got the 50-week moving average. That's where I gave the big buy signal. And you can see there, my buy-sell indicator gave a perfect buy, just like it gave a beautiful sell signal up there. I'm going to be looking for those momentum indicators to give me a sell signal again. When I start to see the stochastic RSI, the RSI, and the MACD begin to turn bearish on the weekly time frame, that's going to give me a great signal to get out. And you can see on the weekly time frame, we are now oversold. However, this can stay oversold for some time. If you look over here,
you mean overbought? You mean overbought?
Oh yeah, overbought. Thank you, Josh. Thank you. So overbought there, and you can see in November it went overbought, but it still went up considerably from November all the way through to didn't really start coming down until December. So there was a full month there that there was a lot more price appreciation. So you go based off that, maybe there's another month here and then that will roll over. That doesn't mean that the bull run for me will be over. I then flip to the monthly time frame, and if you look at one of Josh's favorite indicators here is the MACD on the monthly. And what you can see here, this was the end right here, November 2021, and the MACD gave it to us perfectly here, crossing bearish right here, and you can see my indicator again gave a perfect sell signal right at the top in November of 2021, okay? And so that's what I'll be looking for the end of this bull run, is that monthly turning over. And as you can see here, we're not really close to that happening. There's a nice gap there, Josh, and actually you see the blue just curling up there bullish. And so I don't think that we're close to the end. We would need to see some capitulation for that to turn over. Of course, anything is possible. So those are the indicators that I'm really looking for and looking at the moment. So as far as a top comes, yes, Josh.
Well, okay, no, I'm worried we're going to run out of time, so I want to hit you with a pointed question. Just because, yes. So what exactly is the immediate top that you're watching for?
For immediate top, as in the top of the bull run?
No. Well, okay, you could call it however you want. Where do you expect us to hit next and pull back from?
Yeah, I would say we're going to see some resistance at 113,000. That will be where I think Bitcoin will have some sell-off. Whether or not that becomes a local top or not, I'll look to those momentum indicators or not, but certainly we could push. I agree with Tim. We could push up to 120 And there are some levels in there between like 117, 120, 113, around that area.
You're
so
doing it. I'm fighting. Remember, I'm fighting you today. I can't get 9 numbers. I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna ask you one more time. Where are we going to hit?
120 is what I see.
All right. So 113 or 120? Which do you have more conviction on?
I would say 120.
All right, then. All right. Sold. Thank you guys for your patience with me. You know, so it seems that all three of us expect that as we got over 110K, that we are likely going to press higher, make an all-time high, that there probably would be some panic profit takers, and that we're going to get a little bit of a pullback. So in a moment, we're going to go over pivot 2, right? Where do we think we would go if we were to pull back off of this 113 to 120 range? Where would we need to pull back and stay above so that the up move would be intact? But before I do that, let me quickly show you guys the Bitcoin chart, because I want to get a lot of things jam-packed. I so appreciate my guests. Remember, let's see if I can get it right. This is my buddy Mark from Tribal Trades. And this is my buddy Tim from Investing Bros. They both have their own YouTube pages. They both have their own Discords. You can find me and Mark in the Stocks with Josh Discord. You see that link, and you get a lot of the great trades and attention from both of us there. All right, I'm going to take you guys into my chart real quick, and I want to make a couple points, because I know some people they hear people talk about things, and it's not the same until you see it with your own eyes. First of all, here's the monthly chart. And I want you to imagine a ball that gets thrown in the air, and this represents Bitcoin from 2010 all the way to 2025, 15 years. Obviously, nothing ever goes straight up to the sky, right? Things have an arch, and they begin to slow down. And you can actually see that this is really, really running a very, very consistent curve that as you get closer to this top, you can really see that it's sort of flattening out. And that's because Bitcoin's becoming a mature asset. I want to point out volume, because candles are your first indicator of what is going on with an asset, because they reflect price over a given period of time. In these are 1 month candles, which means that the entire candle represents the price at the beginning of the month and the end of the month. If it's green, it started here and it went up. And if it's red, it started here and it went down. All right, so I want to point out something. We're on a high time frame view. That back here was when Bitcoin was wildly popular with massive buyers in volume. Look at those volume bars. And I want to show you that with BlackRock and all of the institutional adoption that we've had, we have the absolute lowest volume in the history of Bitcoin. And as we climb higher, unlike what some people will tell you, volume is getting drilled into the floor. It's dropping month after month. Each of these candles shows a lower level of transactional interest. I know I'm beating up the bulls today. I want everybody to make money. I'm pointing this out to you. I'm bullish. I love this asset, and I don't actually ever intend to sell my Bitcoin. It was Michael Saylor that convinced me to just hold and buy more. So I do believe that we're going to see a $260,000 Bitcoin before 2030. So that's exciting. But I also recognize that this is becoming a mature asset. So let's quickly look at the momentum indicators. And this is going to tell you something about why I believe that we are approaching a potential top. Now, what you heard from Mark, and I want to agree with him, is that at the current moment, Bitcoin, the signal line is the orange line, and the MACD line is the blue line. We're on the monthly time frame, and there's 2 things I want you to note and not forget. One, we are significantly above the momentum top of 2021. Remember, volume is lower, but momentum right now is higher. Now, it could be argued by a lot of technical analysts that ever since we got above this momentum top, if it took this much momentum to get to the top of 2021, that we're already in an extended momentum run. And now Mark made the point that we were pointing up, and so all was good. And I would agree with him, because I believe that at this moment, as you hear my voice, all is good in crypto. But I want to warn you that the fact that we are in this extended momentum push on the MACD, on the monthly, higher than the previous top, that this is actually a warning zone for momentum, that we could turn. And I'm going to bring my face up because I want you guys to, I have more to show you on that chart, but I want you to look me in the face. What did kind of a clue did Wall Street give us this yesterday? Okay. We got a little bit of bad news, and it wasn't even new news. It was the Moody downgrade. We got a little bit of bad news, and they didn't do any stealth selling. They didn't give us any warning whatsoever. They just put their money on the table. They put their stocks on the table, and they hit the sell button, and we had a huge red candle down day. This is giving us a clue of the way things are going to be moving forward. This is a market that's prepared to not unwind slowly, but it's a market that's prepared to sell hard at the top. And it's not going to take much. Now, I've been saying for a long time that the risk was to the bears, but I would say that we are still in a bullish trend. And so I'm still optimistic. My original prediction that we're going to continue to climb through the month of May and the first week of June, possibly the second week of June, is still on the table. But I believe that we got our first clue from Wall Street, their temperament right now. And it's not to unwind slowly. It's to drop their bag on a dime. So let me go back to the chart. Give me one more second here just to give you guys a little bit more. So this is RSI momentum. And this on a monthly time frame, okay? Let me just clean up my chart for a minute. I promise you guys a good show. If you guys are enjoying this show, please hit the like for me if you've not hit it yet. All right, look at how we are sort of on borrowed time on momentum, already above the previous high of momentum, right? We're on significantly higher momentum, not significantly higher price. It's a little bit concerning. And we have significantly reduced, or we call this long-term bearish divergence on the monthly chart on the RSI, not just from the previous cycle, but within this cycle as well. If we zoom in here, I'll give you guys my quick prediction as to what I think will happen, is the RSI is going to give us some great clues. I think that it's very possible that we will get this. We have a triple test right here, which means that when we get on the RSI, possibly all the way to this level, this is where we're going to find and be very close to the potential pivot top. And on that point, I'm going to define pivot top for you guys. It does not mean it's the all-time high potential of the move. This is simply a statistical analysis of where liquidity is going to dry up and where the bulls are going to get exhausted and where things are going to pull down from. Pivot tops are typically the peaks that you see in a chart, and pivot bottoms are the lows. And you can have pivot tops and pivot lows in an uptrending market. Each time the pivot low is a little bit higher than the previous pivot low, that tells you that the trend is intact and we're continuing to climb. And so right now for me, the pivot top is between 114 and 116. I believe we're going to hit that by next week when Michael Saylor takes the stage. Bitcoin typically rallies before Bitcoin. And I think, Tim, I'll come to you for a minute. Isn't it true that we normally rally into the Bitcoin conference and normally it's a buy the rumor, sell the news? What's your memory of that?
Yeah, no, I was actually talking about that this morning with our VIP group, that usually there is a sell-off. Now, what was interesting about last year is that all things before that we would sell off in the conference. Last year was actually some volatility. There was actually rallying during the conference. It was right at the end of the conference that Bitcoin started to pull back. That was new. That was different. Actually, usually we fall before the conference. I'll tell you this though, Josh. I don't like always looking at events and saying, well, every time in the past this has happened, this is what happened. If Bitcoin has had like 20 conferences and all 20 conferences the price crashed, then I would be like, yeah, like that's enough times. There was no fake out happening. But there's only been a handful of Bitcoin conferences. And in the world of Bitcoin, the minute you think you have this system figured out of what it does every time, that's usually when it fakes out on you. For example, every time in the past, Bitcoin does not hit new all-time highs before Bitcoin halving. What happened last year? We hit new all-time highs before Bitcoin halving. Every time in the past, the 4-year cycle would say altcoin season is a consistent thing. If it had continued, altcoin season should have started back in December. It gave us a fake out. There was a moment there where Bitcoin dominance plummeted, but are any of us saying altcoin season truly launched? It didn't. I don't know if I'm a big fan of saying just because there's a system that people are used to, you should follow it. For example, I'll give you another one. You guys ever heard the expression sell in May and walk away? That's a very common expression. Terrible advice for this year, right? This would be a terrible year to have sold in May and walk away. But
well, Tim,
Josh,
actually, historically, May is green, been green 7 out of 14 times. So actually,
yeah,
not just
50-50.
this year, but a lot of previous years. You're right. It's September is usually the most bearish month, actually, and no one says sell in September and go away. But you're 100% right.
It doesn't rhyme. Josh, will you allow me to fight you for a second?
Absolutely.
You said on the show we have to fight here. Can I fight and do a little pushback on monthly chart MACD analysis? Now, I want to preface this. Josh has been doing TA way longer than me. I love learning.
You don't
from
have
Josh.
to. Hit me, brother.
But it's just something I'm sitting here chewing on. If you go to my screen,
yes,
and I'll minimize the others here. Oh, did not want. I wanted my MACD up. So we're talking about this crazy explosion of MACD right here. All right, absolutely right. I mean, it's astronomical. It's a 16,000. Right. I've never seen another chart where I've seen a MACD go up to 16,000. Maybe Josh, you know of one because you've looked at more charts than me. But to me, I don't know if I would necessarily consider that fair because, yes, it's astronomical compared to the 2021 highs. And then you barely even see the 2018 highs, and you definitely don't see anything happening back in here unless you back out and you only take a look at those local time periods back here, in which case, in this period of time, I think argument would be made, man, that's an astronomical MACD process. Then you go up and it goes even higher. And then even higher and even higher. And I was cross-referencing, for example, let's go take a look at the S&P 500, where if you were to take a look at the S&P 500, let's minimize RSI here and just take a look at the MACD. The S&P 500 is doing the same thing. But again, if you go back into the history of it, you zoom in and you take a look at it, it's all a comparison game, right? It comparatively, 99 looked absolutely crazy. But if I scroll back, and I go back here into the, what is this, the 80s? I mean, you could make the argument that this peak here in 1987 was historically just enormous. Oh, we need a major correction, right? Well, I don't see that on the chart. I see the S&P 500 continuing to climb. And my overall point that I want to make here, Josh, is yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's good to be aware of this curvature. There's a lot of people talking about this curvature, almost acting like Bitcoin's going to flatten out, maybe have a little correction before it finally goes. Everything up into this point, and I'm going to kind of mark it, everything up until this point right here. If I can grab it, there you go. This is all retail investors. This is institutions did not touch Bitcoin whatsoever. This is just regular people like you, like me, buying Bitcoin and it going berserk. What happened in 2021 is the emergence of institutions and companies getting involved in Bitcoin. This, of course, one of the big reasons why Bitcoin exploded in early 2021 was when Elon Musk announced that Tesla was going to start stacking their Bitcoin. All of a sudden, Bitcoin goes berserk, right? Let me get rid of this line here. Well, why did we have a big pullback in May of 2021 and have a long downward summer? Because institutions like Tesla and Elon Musk, they sold some Bitcoin and expressed concern about environmental impacts. We began to see the emergence of governments and institutions suppressing Bitcoin, talking about how terrible the technology is, actively shorting against the process. Why is that a big deal? Because that's where the real curve gets going and starts to pick up momentum. This boring sideways curve has come from when institutions started saying, don't buy Bitcoin. They started shorting it. Bitcoin's evil. You get the picture.
Well, okay, but let me, I want to better understand you. First of all, I appreciate everything you're saying, but here's the question. The volume, no matter what the reason is, we now have institutional adoption and interest. Larry Fink is drooling over Bitcoin. He wants to control it all, buy all the miners, buy everything. Why is the volume decreasing? Could you address that from your point of view?
Yeah, I would say, are we going to say that go back to my screen here and I'll show this. Are we going to say that there was actually more money flowing back here in 2012 and 2013 than there was here in 2021 or even right now? No, that's going to have to do obviously with the asset being, buying one Bitcoin way back here, buying at $3, right? So you can buy a whole lot of Bitcoin. And that makes the volume look really big. I would actually make the argument, Josh, that the low volume right now with the high price is an expression of how bullish we really still have to go. I think what's going to happen to mark the top is a spike in volume. I mean, take a look back here at these tops. I mean, this volume is all lower than the 2011 and 2013 volume, but this spike in volume, January 2018, bull market top. This spike in volume right here, while it wasn't effectively the top, it marked pretty darn stinking close. I mean, if you had sold on that volume up here at $59,000, $58,000, that's pretty good. I mean, that's a pretty good top. Even if you had held out to 69, it's a pretty good selling top. We have no big volume coming in. And one of the reasons why it's tapering off is, again, just how much more valuable each Bitcoin is than it was comparatively to the other times. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for this volume to pick back up and see the massive institutional money, see more retail come in. That's when I would say, when you see that spike in volume, that's when I think you should be concerned that that spike in volume is the last bit of buyers and then exit liquidity of people taking profit and running for the hills.
I love what you're saying. I'm going to give a quick thought on volume, and I want to make sure I get a couple more important details, because even though I'd love to have a 4-hour show, I don't think people would get exhausted. Thank you, Tim, for that. I'm going to take you guys into my chart. I'm going to talk to you briefly about volume and the clues that it gives us to what will happen. So here's the 2021 top and the second higher high. And the biggest volume bar right here, which was signaling that we are getting very close to the top, obviously preceded the first top. And then after that, the second biggest bar was obviously this selling bar, which was an early signal that we were cascading into the winter, right? And then after that, when we got that second top, we actually had no volume, no surge in volume, right? And so let's just keep an eye on that. First of all, I disagree. I want to just go on the record of officially thinking that I love Tim's point, but I do not agree that I think we will. I'll be watching for a spike up in volume, but I would agree with my point that the institutional adoption has not led to the FOMO, but it's leading to more manipulation, and it'll ultimately lead to more price stabilization. And we're ultimately going to continue to see volume go lower and lower because they're going to control it. They're going to control it on the back hidden ledger books, and that's the way. It's the reason why AMC never shorted, and it's an illusion. The idea and the story that the supply and demand are going to come to a head, and this is just going to break out to no. It's going to break out when smart money has their bag full, and this decline in volume is an early signal of the fact that it's becoming a mature asset. That's my view. All right, real quick. So here we have the largest spike was this initial spike. This is the largest volume bar that we had right here. Okay, that coincided with our very first top that we got back in March of 2024. Now we have a secondary volume bar, but it's smaller than the previous, and it coincides with that big push up that we got all the way to 100K. And now we are up higher, almost by 116, and the smallest volume bar on the chart is down here. Now, for a classic technical analyst, this either one of two things is going to happen. This buying momentum is going to dry up, and the bulls are going to get exhausted somewhere in my range. And I put it on the chart so you guys don't have to guess what it is. My pivot 1 is this 116. My pivot 2 is this 128. And either we're going to get this magical volume node that I'm messing with Tim, that Tim's imagining out of nowhere that's going to shoot us up into the stratosphere, or we're going to get a repeat of the last cycle, which is sort of neutral momentum until the end comes. I'm going to give Tim a chance to rebut me, and then I'm going to give you guys the line in the sand that tells me that the up move is over. So what are your thoughts on what I just shared?
I think very good points, and I think it's okay to agree to disagree. It's in the world we live in right now, people act like if you disagree with someone, that automatically means you hate them, which is very wrong and very false. It's okay for us to disagree. I'm excited to see who's right. I think my only contention would be, I liked how you pointed out that the biggest part of the volume came during the upswing. I think that's a very good point. There was a second peak. If you looked at that volume, I think you were looking on the weekly chart. I could be wrong.
I'm on the monthly chart still.
Okay, I have to. I mean, let me pull mine up so I can just address that with you. The big volume that came in here. Okay, you are. The big volume that came in here is during the upswing momentum. Here's what happened in that month, though. If you look at that, that's January. January was when altcoin season started. So if you were to look at like let's just do the weekly chart, for example, and I can find that zone. This is where there was a miniature little pullback. But if I go to the weekly chart, which had more volume in it? This little move right here or the descendants back down? And so the monthly and the weekly, they can tell different stories. And I just lost it again. So let me find it. I apologize, everybody. They tell different stories, but at the end of the day, what I see is a spike in volume for some purchasing, some selling, overall excitement, and another one saying, hey, we're selling off here. And then what happened is the markets are so drub at this point. Yeah, we have a nice sign, boring little nothingness for the next top. But this cycle, we haven't gotten any real spike in volume. You can call this one here right there. And maybe this is your point. And maybe I have to give this one to you. I disagree, but maybe you would say, Tim, this was the spike in attention and we're working on the second leg that's going to be boring, very similar to 2021. And that works if you follow this, says that we're going to repeat what happened in 2021. I would say I'm probably more of a believer in following what happened back in 2017, 2018 with massive retail adoption of Bitcoin. I think we're seeing massive institutional adoption. Let me say last thing and then I'll throw it back to you. Again, governments fought Bitcoin in 2021. Institutions shorted Bitcoin in 2021. That part is true. What is happening right now? Institutions are lining up at the door to buy Bitcoin. Governments are not just wanting to buy Bitcoin. We're seeing locked up Bitcoin that will never leave. MicroStrategy, CEP, these are businesses built on Bitcoin holding, never selling. Governments like the United States, China, India, Russia, even other countries have begin those conversations about creating their own Bitcoin stockpiles. Anyone who sells, any smart money who sells their Bitcoin, they're just pretty much donating it for a cheap fee to institutions and governments who have a longer term picture of Bitcoin and are going to hold it for a long, long, long time.
Let me ask you a question. And, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I respect that you'll give me the straight skinny on it. Mm-hmm. Are you going to sell your Bitcoin this cycle?
No.
Let's hit Kiwi Mo.
I will be selling some Bitcoin this cycle. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because it's never going to go up in a straight line. We saw it come down. If you held Bitcoin 109 and you sold some or all, you could have bought it back at 74, 75. Let's be smart people. We don't have to have a one size fits all towards our trading strategies. We can have diversity there. And someone holding all their Bitcoin and keeping it over multiple cycles, great, that's fine. And I believe that person, and Josh has indicated that he's likely never selling his Bitcoin, can be an absolutely fantastic strategy. You could use it as collateral, borrow, buy things against it, loan it, earn yield on it in the future. I think banks will even be allowed to custody Bitcoin. You maybe have it parked at the bank and even have it insured by the FDIC. Who knows what's coming down the track? But I'll say this, when I see a top coming, I'll be looking at cashing in because I'm a trader and I'm here to make money. And I love it. Buy, sell high and buy back lower. And so that's what I'll be doing.
Thank you. I don't mean to cut you off. I really value what you're saying. And I think it's very applicable to a lot of people that are listening. I'm going to try to push through because we're getting right on the line of it being longer than I want it to be. I'm going to quickly show you guys this chart because it'll be important for me to make my point. When we were down here, and if you've traveled with me for a long time, when we were down here, I called the bottom, right? And when we were here is when I bought the majority of my Bitcoin right there, right under 27,000. And at that time, in this window of time, if you've been a member of my show for the last number of years, I said that my ideal profit range that we would hit in the course of time this is when there was no believers, right? This is when it was hard to be a believer. My take profit or my profit goal was 80K. Okay. So that was my initial target given back here. And when we got up into this consolidation phase in this area, I said, we've got to reevaluate what it's going to be like. Obviously, I didn't sell any. And in that environment, I said we would eventually drop to 73 and that we would likely go on to get to 116 and that I would have to reevaluate from there. I'm going through this because it's important. If all the stars were to align and a lot has to happen on the macro environment, I need to see China, I need to see the Ukraine-Russia war end, I need to see credit worthiness come back to the U.S. I need to see China buying our bonds like they're going out of fashion. I need to see all the trade deals worked out. And I need to see a Fed that says, hey, guys, I'm giving you back-to-back 100 basis point rate cuts. Okay. Now, in this environment, and that's news that I can't predict. I'll call those some swan events, orange swan event, as someone said. If all that came together in one foul moment, then it would dramatically change my top prediction because the macro would change. The macro would change. And in as far as what Bitcoin could do, Bitcoin has a clear shot, if it were to be similar to what Tim said a moment ago, if it would be more like the 2017, 2018 rally, Bitcoin could go as high as 173,000. That was all stars aligning top, okay? Now, we don't have all those good things happening right now. We've got a ton of question marks on the macro and a lot of unresolved problems. And there is a fair amount of bullishness in the market and a fair amount of bearishness. Both the bulls and the bears are showing up to Wall Street each and every day trying to fill their bags and make it their cash ATM. As a result, in this immediate time frame of everything that I can see in the charts, taking into consideration price and the momentum indicators, I find my pivot 1 to be 116K and my pivot 2, which is my extended rally number, 128. And if we get up there and the buying holds and the momentum flattens out but doesn't turn down, and we look like we're going to take another leg up, we'll evaluate it then. But the big question that I have for all of you is, what is your trade plan? I have found success and am making good money on Wall Street because I have disciplines and a daily trade plan that I stick to. On everything I enter, I have a strategy of when I want to get in and when I want to get out. I'm not moved by the crowd. I'm going by my drum and my drum only. I love listening to these guys. I love hearing their points of view, but I'm following myself and my trade plan. And as I told you guys, if we buy in between 80 and 73,000, I said, we will get back up to 110. I said, and I'll be locking in profits when others are getting greedy, and I'll have made some more money. I will have made some more money. And I don't need to be very greedy. I don't need the tippy top. I don't intend to sell my Bitcoin right now. I haven't been given an incentive to, but let's talk about this, okay? If it pulls back to what number is the run over? How low can we go if we hit 116,000 in my view and 120 as the initial target for Mark's view? If we get into that range and we begin to have a little bit of sell-off after the Bitcoin conference, how low can we go and still be in an overall uptrend? I'll give my answer last. Tim, would you give me yours?
Yeah, I would say I always hate these types of questions because you put a number and then the price drops to it and it's like, all right, does that mean I have to turn bearish now? And it's not that. So I'm going to give an extremely low one. I'm going to say as long as we're putting in higher highs and higher lows, I'm going to remain bullish. So let's go 74,400 and some change. That's going to be, if we stay above that low that we had in early April, I'm still bullish. Now, I think I'll give a clarification there. Again, I purposely went low there. I think at that point, if we get to 116, I would be surprised if we drop back down below $100,000 at that point. I think $100,000 would be a very strong level of support. but I am not willing to say, oh, if we drop below 100K, I'm automatically bearish and I'm going to go down. In the same way, Josh, I think I was on your show before. By no means do I get everything right, because I remember being on this show saying that I thought that 90K would hold, right? It didn't. Did that mean I all of a sudden said, guys, we're in a bear market, we're done? No, I was wrong. I was wrong about something. I readjusted. I said, okay, 74 to 72 range is going to be my zone. Ended up being right about that support level. And now look at us. We're back at all-time highs. So I'm going to say, let me drop below 74 before I get bearish. But realistically, I think it'd be probably slim that we get below 100,000 in my personal opinion.
I love it. Thank you for being direct so people can understand you, because people are showing up here because they're wanting to get some clear answers. Thank you for that. All right, my man, Mark, not Tim.
Yeah.
What is, do you have a max threshold, thou shall not pass number?
Yeah, I would say I would not want to see a full weekly candle open and close below the 50-week average, moving average. And I think we see that it's over. Currently, that's sitting at around 80,000. So Bitcoin was to suddenly capitulate below that level, that would be my line in the sand. So that's a line that's already always moving, and you can add it to your charts. But historically, when there's been a weekly candle that has opened and closed below the 50-week moving average, that has always been the end. And I would expect that to be the case as well. But I'd also agree with Tim as well. I think it's important that we maintain that bullish structure and continue to create higher highs and higher lows there as well. So from a price point, if you're putting me on the spot there, it's going to be, right now it's 80,700. Of course, in a week's time, that could be a little bit higher. It's creeping up, but that's my line in the sand.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to give you mine, and I'm going to tell you guys what to expect in the remainder of the show. First of all, I think this show should have more likes to it. Normally, I have 1,000 likes, but you guys must have been so engaged and so intrigued that you just didn't even think to take a minute and smash that like. If you could pop up my likes, it feeds the video out to more viewers. It grows me, it grows Mark and Tim, and we'd all appreciate it. Thank you, guys. If you've made it this far, we're probably doing something interesting. All right, where is my line in the sand that if the price crosses back below, I believe that it will lead to an absolute moment of fear and a cascading sell and a continuation of red candles that we will not recover from, because I believe that we're late in the hour and late in the Bitcoin cycle. And I believe that when we make our tops here, unless they continue, I believe that the move is largely going to be booked. Let me show it to you in the charts. Drum roll. Absolutely, for a fact, 101,500. We cannot break that anymore, or the cascading of selling begins. I want to throw out a little bit of agreement with Mark and say that the secondary confirmation, so I've got a pivot 1 for the bull case and a pivot 2 for the bull case. Well, my pivot 1 for the bear case is 101,500. My pivot 2 would be a candle that opens and closes beneath the 50 on the weekly. The red line there is the 50 EMA. And if we get a candle that opens beneath it and closes beneath it, you're going to hear me out here saying that we have absolutely entered into the winter season. All right. So in my mind, you know, you guys do with that as you please. But I remember those who were saying, oh, Lord, if this gets back to 110K, I will promise you I will sell all my crypto. I just want to remind you, remember my face. I'm here to remind you. I love this. So I'm going to let's talk about one more question, and that's the answer of when. When is this going to come to pass? How much longer would you guys think? And I think we've already heard, and obviously I'm going to be the conservative guy on this show, but we're going to get around as to when do you guys get nervous and you think that we're too late in the bull cycle for there to be a higher high? I'm going to give mine. And remember, these things get recorded. They're posted on my show. We're going to be back here in 2 years. I'm going to be snippeting and playing this stuff over with the two of you. And it's going to, you know, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, but let's let the family know. I'm going to start with you, my friend Tim. When do you think enough's enough, the top's behind us? Is there a timeline for you?
No, there's not. So I'll be very brief. Four-year cycle, in my opinion, dead. I think we're going to look a lot more like how stocks have looked in the past. I have put predictions with mathematical equations talking about summer to fall of 2026. I don't have a date. I actually genuinely don't believe that we'll ever see like a 70% pullback on Bitcoin ever again, barring a Great Depression type of situation where people have to dump it to feed themselves and do things. I'm the crazy one. I'll start off with crazy. You guys give the more sane takes, but I just don't see the 4-year cycle playing out. I think it's gone.
I love that. It's a very it's a strong take that people have been putting out there, that things have changed and the 4-year cycle is dead and we're not going to have the peaks and valleys that we previously had. I will say in response to that I somewhat agree. I believe that we're entering into an out of a stronger pattern from the past, and I do, in my opinion, see crypto running with the overall macro market. I believe that as institutions adopt it, it's going to take on the characteristics of institutional trading. In some cases, it's going to lead. In other cases, it's going to follow. And I believe that we're not going to go as low in the winter. That was another one of the questions. And if we've got time, I'll throw out what the winter low might be. But let me just jump in. And Tim, let's get your response real quick. When is it too late to be bullish on Bitcoin?
I was going to say we need to come up with a new name here. I like this one here. I've got one here for you. Hear me out here. It's
Did I say Tim?
Wait, I've got it here, guys.
Everybody's
Stocks with
Tim.
Mark. Hold on. It should be. Please address me now. Stocks with Mark from Tribal Investing Bros. Okay?
There we go. There we go.
I love it. I love it. All right, Kiwi Mo, stop causing trouble. When is it too late to be Bitcoin bullish?
Look, I would say that historically, we should see an end of the cycle, usually November, December. I think it'll come a little bit earlier. However, I think there is an argument to make that Bitcoin could continue and not go into as much of a bear market as we've seen in the past, because it has the ETF, it has that institutional buying, and maybe it ticks along more closely correlated to the stock market. And the charts do support that, where Bitcoin has been more correlated to the stock market. It's actually, you could say that it's kind of front run the stock market in some respects.
Yes, I agree.
It pumped for the stock market, and it's pumped. And are we going to see the stock market go after it? And then, but altcoins have decorrelated and decoupled from Bitcoin. So I think altcoins are going to have their usual bear market. Their winter is going to come. But like I said, I don't disagree with Tim. I'm not saying yes 100% that we're not going to see the usual 4-year cycle out, but there is certainly an argument. And I wouldn't be surprised if we did see Bitcoin track more with the stock market and not have its usual crypto winter. And I would agree, I'm not sure we're going to see Bitcoin drop 70%. Of course, it has in the past, so it will until it doesn't, and maybe this will be the time that it doesn't. But I would certainly say for altcoins, we are going to see altcoins go into a bear market as normal.
All right, that's wonderful. I want to give you guys mine. My prediction is this. I want you to remember everything I'm saying, because it is always an if-then, because that's the way it is. The market is not one-dimensional. It's not two-dimensional. It's not even three-dimensional. It's got dimensions I cannot see. It's got surfaces beyond my ability to grasp. But I do believe that if the macro environment changes and shifts wildly bullish, then this would not be the case. Okay, we could enter into a different blow off top scenario. And there's some smart analysts that I follow who also see the potential of a blow off top in stocks and crypto coming. I've talked about it on my show and alluded to the fact that if certain technical indicators fire a certain way, right, and one of them being on the SPY that we close above 595 with volume, then it means that the stock market's going to continue to climb through the summer, and we're going to get all the way up to 633 on the SPY. Now, that is a best case scenario, right? It's an if-then scenario. Now, if we remain in the environment of uncertainty in which we are currently in, where nobody quite knows what the Fed's going to do and what type of deals are going to get worked out with World War tariff, and we are obviously hugely dependent on interest rate cuts, in this environment of uncertainty without huge bullish catalysts, I believe that it's not rational to be Bitcoin bullish after July. I obviously have the most conservative view, but my view is also dependent on other macro events coming into line for it to change. If those events have not come into line and we have gotten between my pivot 1 and my pivot 2 of 116 to 128, and those events have not come into occurrence, and we begin to fade the top and cascade under 101 500, I believe, and we're past the month of July, then in my mind, the winter is upon us. And I'm going to give one more Q&A round for these guys who I think have done an incredible job, put up with my fire today, and given great answers and stood on their own views, which is what all of us are expected to do. The next question is, what will be the future Bitcoin low? How low do we have to go? These guys more than me view that there may no longer be a winter. I still believe in the winter. I believe in the extended downturn and the events that drive Bitcoin and the altcoins. I believe that will continue. But I do believe that because Bitcoin's become a more mature asset, we're going to see less of a downdraft. We're still going to see the alts get annihilated down to 90 to 95%. Some of the better alts might hold up to around 84% down. But Bitcoin, I somewhat agree with them that it may not go down as much as it has in the past. I'll give you guys my prediction low, which is actually based on how high we're going to go here. But I'm going to ask these guys if they could give me any form of a prediction. I won't hold you guys to this one because analytically, you really can't figure out the bottom until you found the top. But
Correct.
if you had to guess at the bottom today, starting with my man, Tim, no, Mark, this guy here, I'm just joking.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So to me, the number comes down to I could see a 50% pullback on Bitcoin when we hit the next. Hey, let's have a good correction here. I think we're going to see several 30% corrections between now and the next couple of years. I think the next bear market, I'm thinking about roughly 50%, if that. With that said, again, I'm going to stick with some of the predictions I've made. I'm predicting no top. I predict a pullback could happen in July. I actually think a pullback in July makes sense, Josh. I think another pullback at the end of September makes sense. Not bear market, pullback. I think we'll see pullbacks every couple of months, but I believe we go into 2026, potentially even the end of 2026 before we see a bear market. And by that time, is Bitcoin at 250? Is Bitcoin at 300? I don't know. 50%. Let's just pretend. Let me take a stab at here and say 300,000, 350. That's a very key level on Fibonacci extension, by the way, as you start to play those out. If that was the case and I stick with 50%, could we pull back down to 175 at some point, maybe 175 to $200,000 range? But again, this is all based on the precedent or based on the thought process. We are in an extended cycle now. I also want to make sure to spell any FUD about myself. When asked, Josh, I think you and I are in the same boat. I think you already did. Am I going to sell Bitcoin? I am not going to sell Bitcoin. I'm 31 years old. Bitcoin is going to become my retirement. Bitcoin is going to be what I pass on to my children. I am going to take profit next year on my altcoins. I am trading Bitcoin right now. I'm in a massive long position on Bitcoin. I am going to take profit. I'm going to buy a house next year, the first house I've ever owned. I'm going to invest in other businesses. Crypto will be sold. But there's only 21 million Bitcoin on the planet. There will never be more. There's more than 60 million millionaires. I own a couple Bitcoin. Why would I part ways with that when it's the scarcest value asset the world's ever seen? I'm going to ride the waves. I'm going to add to the Satoshis every chance I can get. Altcoins, on the other hand, we trade those. We sell those all the time.
I love it. All right, let's expedite these answers because I also want to squeeze in, or maybe I won't. I have this topic of where are we at in the altcoin season? But before we get into that, Mark, would you give us your potential bottom? I know we can't be too clear on it, but where would you consider getting greedy again? Everybody thinks in the back of their mind, hey, if this thing tumbles and falls, I'm going to reload when everybody else is too afraid, because it just continues to do extremely well. I mean, it went from 15,500 to right now almost 111,000, and that's a massive move. And that's a game-changing, wealth-changing event in anyone's life, is to get on top of Bitcoin when it's down on its lows. Where's that low going to be, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, if we start a capitulation now, which we won't, but if we did, the 200-week moving average, simple moving average, has generally been a good guide, and that's sitting at about 48,000. Let's just say that we get to around 130 to 150. I would agree with Tim. I think we could see like a 50%, 55% correction somewhere around there, and that the 200-week moving average by that point would have moved up a fair bit higher, which would put us somewhere in the high 60s to the mid 70s would be that. But you are very right. It's very difficult to say until there is a confirmed top in. And that's what enabled you to nail that 73, 74K area, because a confirmed top had already been in, and then you were able to accurately give guidance to within a few $100s of that being the bottom, Josh. So I would say the same thing based off what I can see right now on the charts. If we get that 130 to 150K top Bitcoin, which is, I think, is a reasonable and realistic target that we can get to, then I think somewhere in the high 60s to mid 70K.
Okay, I love it. And I'll give you guys my prediction. I'm going to take you into the chart real quick. First of all, we don't know where the top is, and so the top can dramatically change things. But I want to give you guys some historic perspective of types of discounts we've had. So back here in 2017, down to the winter low, there was an 84% drop, an 84% drop. Of course, there had also been multi-thousands of point climb. So at the time, that's a pretty big drop, but you got to take it into perspective of where it came from. I mean, the move began here at $162 and ended at 20,000. So it pulled back from 20,000 back to 3,000, but it was an 84% drop. And then in the last bull cycle, 2021, this thing ran up obviously to 68,000 from the number I gave you a moment ago, which was back from 3,000. It ran up to 68,000. Boy, what a story does that tell? It says you've been sleeping on Bitcoin. You don't like money. So then this thing pulled back into the winter all the way down to 16,000, and that was a 77% move. Okay, so we went from an 84 to a 77. They're really not that different. Those are the last two pullbacks that we got off of the all-time high, 84 and 77 back in 2021. So I am a little bit, I am not imagining that we're going to do a greater than 70%. And a lot of where we pull back to has a lot to do with how high we reach. If we were to get to just my pivot top of 116 and we were to pull back at a conservative 60%, okay, which shows enormous amount of maturity in the asset. It's a huge drop in volatility, a massive drop in volatility. It gets us, this number is not correct. Let me fix it. It gets us down to 46,000. Okay. And so if we were to climb up to my pivot 2 of 128,000, then it means that we get down to 57 in this little bit more conservative take on things. And so, in my mind, I had said this in previous videos that I'm going to be tempted to buy anything below 60K. I'm going to be aggressively buying by 50K, and I'm going to be loading the boat anything under 50K. So this is my drooling range for the future. I believe that we could, now just keep this in perspective. We almost 10x'd. We didn't 10x, but 15,000 back here, right? This was the low, all the way from 15 to 110. This is about an 8x. I don't know off the top of my head. If you guys want to give me a more specific number, that's fine. But it's not quite a 10x, but we get up to 128. This is going to be an 8 to 10x. If we were to get up here and pull back to 50K and we were to get a 10x, you're talking about something between $380,000 and $500,000 potential in the next Bitcoin bull cycle. And so you can understand why we're not sleeping on this and why we're talking about it with so much passion today, because that's game changing. That's game changing. You drop in $100,000 in the future lows, and this gets up north of 300,000, which it could easily do in comparison to previous cycles. You're talking about, life changing, pay off the house and the car and retire for some people. All right. Let's go one more question, but this one's got to be brief and short and concise. Where are we at in the altcoin season? My man, Tim, would you lead us off with that?
It's not altcoin season yet. I think that altcoin season is going to have to wait until heavy liquidity comes back in. I said the other day, and I didn't think we were going to hit it this fast. I said the first thing I need to see is Bitcoin get to a new all-time high. Why would people go heavy into altcoins when Bitcoin's still not at an all-time high? That's the first thing I wanted to see. And you said it earlier, Josh. I 100% agree with you. While Bitcoin, I think, can still run, and altcoins will trickle behind. I'm not saying altcoins are going to fall and go down. We're waiting to see, will Jerome Powell give us some liquidity to buy these risk assets? Can we see altcoins finally get their money? The two things we've always seen in the past: massive Bitcoin run, where people say all of a sudden Bitcoin's overbought, altcoins are oversold. I'd rather buy altcoins. I might even sell my Bitcoin to buy those altcoins. In time yet. I still think there's a chance Bitcoin dominance, currently sitting at 64, definitely goes back over 65%. But do we make a push towards 66? Some people think we can still make a push back towards 70. I don't know about that, but altcoin season's not here. I'm still saying mid to late summer. I think that is different than you, Josh. I think you came on our channel and you're saying maybe a little sooner than that. So I'd love to hear your reasoning again. But my personal opinion, alt season will not happen until we get some liquidity or rumors of liquidity coming back. We might have to wait until late June to July before that happens.
It's a great answer. Thank you for that, Tim. Mark, what's your thoughts on altcoin season?
Yeah, I'm going to fight Tim on this. I think we're absolutely in an alt season. If you could share my charts there, Josh, I'll show you exactly how long we've been in for. We've been in one for about 40 days so far. You can see where the alt's bottomed. That's Tim's charts. Alt's bottomed right here. You got the buy signal right there to buy your altcoins. And I gave those buy signals in the Stocks with Josh Discord. Tau was around $200. That almost hit $500. Now, you can't tell me you're not in alt season. You just may not be in the right altcoins. That's what it comes down to. If you're on the wrong coins, it's not alt season for you. You've got to be in the strong coins. Back in the last cycle, I think there was about tens of thousands of coins. Now there are tens of millions of coins. And so there's altcoin saturation. You've got to choose and pick the right coins. But you can see here, we've had 4 alt seasons in this cycle. This is the 4th one. We can see the last 2 here, this one here that started in November and peaked up here in December. It only lasted about a month. That ran for, not very long there at all. And then you've got one over here that was in February that ran up here as well. And so you're seeing this one here come up. It's having a little bit of a pause, and that we're in alt season right now. How long it will run up for, I think it's got some more legs. I think there are some more legs to it. And on the weekly oscillators, dynamic momentum, you've got the stochastic RSI is looking good on the weekly, and on the MACD has flipped bullish fairly recently. We're above the 200-day moving average as well. And also on the daily, we've started to turn up on those momentum indicators. So I think altcoins still have some room to run, just be in the right ones.
Thank you. I appreciate both of your perspectives.
Can I quickly respond?
Yes.
Because it might just be that me and Mark have different definitions. I think Mark's absolutely right. The crypto market is moving up. To me, Mark, again, we might have different definitions. I don't call that altcoin season. Like I said, altcoins can still rally behind Bitcoin. Altcoin season is when all of a sudden the Bitcoin dominance starts to plummet, where crypto, altcoins as a whole, are the more valuable asset. They're picking up more dominance from the total market cap. If you were to go back and look at altcoin season, I think a lot of people say that altcoin season started January of 2021. Ethereum, Cardano, the big ones that ended up having that bull market, they were rallying before then. They started going ridiculously parabolic. Bitcoin pulled back. Bitcoin dominance started plummeting from 72%, dropping down below 60, and kept on going all the way down to like 35 or 40%. So I guess definitionally, Are altcoins rallying now? Should you be buying altcoins now? Yes. But my thought process, altcoin season, is when altcoins start going berserk, when altcoins are making you hand over fist money.
By that time, it's too late. I mean, if you had bought Tau at 170, now you're going to buy, suddenly you buy it at
I love
500.
it. I love it.
But I'm not saying don't buy altcoins.
Mark.
I'm buying altcoins. The question was, when does altcoin season start? When does altcoins go berserk?
I mean, when altcoins have gone 100%, that's altcoin season.
It's a definition. I think we're having a definition debate. If we're going to change altcoin season to altcoins are pumping, I agree 100%. Buy altcoins. Altcoins are doing well. Altcoins are going to keep doing well. I agree with that statement 100%.
Well, I found value in both of what you said. I believe it tells a broad view of the subject. I'm going to keep my answer very simple. I understand what Mark is saying is that we're off of our lows and the alts are just going to continue to climb. And I think that what Tim is saying, that we're not in that parabolic phase where the money shifts from Bitcoin to alts. And what is happening now is money is still driving into Bitcoin and the Bitcoin price is going up. I would largely just round out that conversation with saying that we're going to get another major thrust here in the alts. And I believe, like Mark is saying, it's begun. And like Tim is saying, we're not yet parabolic. So the best of it isn't over yet. Largely because I've defined that the Bitcoin top, in my opinion, is going to happen here in June and or July, which means that if we run up to 116 and we pull back and we stay above 101,500, and just to be clear, we can cross that price threshold. We just can't close any major candles beneath it. If we dip beneath it and come back above it and close a daily and weekly, then everything is intact, just so you understand the technicals. And we could climb all the way back and break back above 116 and break back up to 128. In that environment, it wouldn't shock me if that takes the month of June. And that also assumes that the macro stays intact and we don't top out at 114 and then lose 101. But if the bullish case stays intact, I see the markets largely peaking. And I see Bitcoin peaking in the month of June, and I see that money beginning to flow into the alts that are already seeing a run up, according to Mark. I see them reaching their ultimate conclusions in the month of June and July. So largely, I see altcoins the same way as both of them, but it's an altcoin summer is what I view. And I could have to come out and tell you that it's been cut short by some bearish macro events. But for the most part, I see that the altcoins have begun, they're off their lows, and I see them continuing to run through the month of, a bare minimum, July, if not even early part of August. But, I will say that the market has had we got that signal this week, and I'm going to keep reminding people of it. The market hasn't worried about doing a slow unroll of their position. When they get scared, they simply push everything on the table and they hit the sell button. So we already got a crack in the system here this week, and everybody panicked, and I still had one or two guys in the comments section telling me, Josh, you said it would be bullish in May, and we came right back up to the top. Google made a higher high today. If you are part of my pro trading community, Stocks with Josh, I put a Google trade setup in there. I took it myself on the cross of price, made thousands of dollars on Google shooting up higher. And, we're definitely chopping higher. The rug has not been pulled on stocks or crypto right now, but we got a peek at the sentiment or the underlying fear that's behind this market when we saw a little bit of a known bad news story cause such a harsh sell down that quickly recovered. That's my take. These guys gave me an incredible show. I think they're the best. That's why they're here with me. I loved all of the disagreement. I think that's what people want from this type of show. I don't profess to be right all the time. Neither do these guys. But we're all looking at the charts and we're hoping to help you guys. This should be part, not to guide you. It should be part of your research and part of your own due diligence. None of this is a suggestion for what you should buy, sell, or hold. I'm in Bitcoin for the long haul. I intend to get Bitcoin ridiculously wealthy. I intend to hold my Bitcoin and I intend to buy. I want to have, 21 Bitcoin. That's my goal. That's my personal life goal for Bitcoin. And then probably I would stop and that will just go to my kids because that's the way it is. They're going to be the ones that possibly benefit from it. I'll see if I have 12 grandkids, maybe. My kids haven't had them yet, but I mean, everybody will get a Bitcoin. Maybe we'll figure out what the will says in the future. It hasn't been decided. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for joining me. Thank you. We didn't get to 1,000. I'm going to pick these guys. No. We're going to go offline. I'm going to pick their brain for just 8 more minutes on some altcoins. And I want you guys to keep an eye out for that video because it's going to be, I don't know what they're going to bring, but I've got fire to bring on some altcoins. And we're going to have a quick conversation offline about Sui. And then I'm going to share that with you guys later. Sui's doing a little bit of a pullback because of some bad news. Could be setting up for some huge profit opportunity. I'll share that with you guys next. Thank you both for joining me. This is Mark from Tribal Trades, and this is Tim from Investing Bros. Go to their pages. In the description of this video is a link to their YouTube pages. Go and hit subscribe. Thank you for smashing the like. Let's get it to 1,000 right before I sign off. Peace and blessings to each of you. I appreciate everybody here. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh.